Hi, thanks, and welcome to our webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Paul A. Wood, and I'm the Director of Experience for Transparent Path. This session will be recorded and made available on the NetCapital website for future viewing. Last week, you had a chance to hear from our CEO and founder, Eric Weaver, about how we're bringing certainty to the supply chain through sensors and actionable intelligence. Today is an opportunity to meet two more team members in a more informal conversation. Greg Lind is our Director of Development, and Lauren Adler is our Director of Product. We'll join them for a conversation in just a minute. Before we get started, I want to remind you that we're raising funds using the equity crowdfunding site, netcapital.com. The food industry is underinvested in data support systems. Businesses lack data on product conditions during transport. This lack of transparency results in billions of dollars of food waste. Transparent Path uses continuously connected sensors and artificial intelligence to help food producers know when something goes wrong, how to act to fix it, and to anticipate future issues before they occur. If you like what you hear and are interested in investing in food certainty, please visit netcapital.com/companies/transparent-path for more information about our offering. Now we'll join Greg and Lauren in their conversation about how they got to Transparent Path, what excites them the most, and how they are looking towards building out Transparent Path in the future.
More about your background and, with your interesting travels and other things that you've done and how you got to this point.
Yeah, I think eclectic is fair for my background. I started off early, just after college, really interested in tech and music actually, and started my own business reselling vintage music instruments on the web, making websites and selling products that way. This was 97, 98. And from there, I sort of switched more towards the tech side and left the music eventually behind, and started getting interested in startups and working in the Portland, Oregon area where I grew up.
So I just have a quick question for you. So you
Yeah.
left the music behind. Were you already doing technology when you left the music behind, or was it a shift? Like, okay,
Yeah,
I'm gonna do this.
no, it was a little of both. I think music. I had an okay music career, but it wasn't exactly paying the bills, let's say. And I had done both in college and had been programming since, since the 80s on a Commodore 64.
Okay.
And so I was still interested in it, but I think eventually tech won out. I still play music, but I think the passion is more around the tech industry and software, especially around open source. I think after startups, I kind of switched more towards the open source realm after working at a couple of government agencies where they were really heavily into Linux servers and learning that sort of programming, Java and Python and Django and all of those sort of things. So that's where I kind of got my start into open source, and then government, and then NGOs. And from NGOs, I worked at Mercy Corps out of Portland, Oregon, and started traveling a lot and working on a project there called Tola Data.
Can you just tell us quickly, for those who aren't familiar, what is Mercy Corps?
Oh boy. So Mercy Corps is an NGO, so a non-governmental organization that has a global reach that works across like multiple areas. They essentially they were really big helping during the Syrian refugee crisis. I remember working in Haiti during helping after the earthquakes there, and in Nepal after the earthquakes there. I mean, they're all over the place, and they're really more about helping economies rebuild and helping people get back on their feet after disasters or government regime change and things like that. So it's a big organization, global footprint, and it was really just an amazing honor to work there. And I learned so much, not just about the company, but about just going to see the world really for the first time. And I think that's kind of where I got interested in travel a little bit more, and this open source connection with that, right? So eventually we spun off our project that we had there called Tola Data, which was an open source project we started to help NGOs manage their project management portfolios, right? So the different types of ways that they manage the projects within an organization, within a country program, and within the actual offices that work there. We, after a while, we spun that out into its own company with a co-founder of mine at the time. And we started to look, we moved quite a bit around trying to find the rights, but we eventually found ourselves in Berlin, where we joined another organization that had a similar idea around open source and around project management and NGOs, and eventually ended up settling there and working on that to the point to where we spun off that yet again into another company called Humanitech, which is where the whole thing for me really started around Buildly, which is my current open source project that I work the most on. And that's Buildly is sort of an open source software architecture as a service, as well as we think of it as a software architect as a service as well, because it's sort of a collective of different software developers that work on different projects around open source. And that's kind of the idea is to work around microservices and Kubernetes and build up more scalable, sustainable applications using that process. And that's kind of how the conversation eventually got started with Transparent Path and all of that, and connecting with Eric. But maybe before I go too far into that.
Well, I have another question for you, though.
Yeah,
Because when
sure.
you and I were talking, I think you said to me that one of the reasons you were attracted to the Mercy Corps role is because you'd never been out of the country, right? But then where did you travel with Mercy Corps?
Yeah, unless you count Canada. I did go to Canada one time, but I was a Pacific Northwest kid. So the first travel was actually to Haiti right after the earthquake. And actually that's part of the connection back to Eric again, because that whole experience there was around mango farmers and helping them track both from the farm where they're taking their loads, how they're getting it down to the distribution center, how that's getting loaded onto boats and then exported, and where that's being used. And it was really sort of that first idea. It was barcode scanning, very rudimentary, using a couple of different Android tablets and things like that. But it was the start of this idea that kind of connected me back then with Eric. Once we got to that discussion, it was like, okay, I could see where he was coming from, food supply chain and things like that were ideas that I had heard of but not really familiar with. And I know that's kind of your interest into this as well, as kind of similar, but maybe catch us up on your background as well, because sure. I know it's interesting for me to hear from Amazon to chocolate to transparent. That's the interesting part for me.
Yeah. No, how did I get here? So I was at Amazon early on. Before that, I had done investment banking. I actually ran a division of a supermarket chain. So my interest actually was in retail and food, and I had done some software development. So this very eclectic background: merchandising, finance, software development, food. And then I got to Amazon, and it was March 18th of 1998. Sorry. Amazon sold books in one country. They had just opened up their second, what they called distribution center at the time, and they had no visibility into their incoming inventory. And so keep making and keeping customer promises was really difficult when you didn't know what was actually going to arrive versus what you ordered. And so I spent most of my time there in supply chain, working with what was then the EDI group. We reorged it, we called it enterprise integration, but it was all about I would say the more analog version of trying to have some kind of electronic trading transaction with your vendor partners, so that you can get better visibility into your supply chain. I did that. It was great, wonderful experience. I love software development. I had actually done that on Wall Street as well, or worked with a software development team there. And I realized I really like software developers. They're very logical. They're low drama. They're good people.
Sometimes.
And I like thinking about how to use technology to solve complex business problems. And so it's always been there for me. But I kind of segued and took a detour and opened a retail chocolate shop for over a decade here in Seattle called Chocolopolis, which I just closed in July, not because of COVID. It was time. But in the process, I became a chocolate expert, I guess you could say. And I get the best part of my job actually is being a chocolate judge. I just judged 2 different rounds of the International Chocolate Awards, which is a group in London. So I got to do the Europe, Middle East, and Africa round, and then I got to do the Asia Pacific round. And because they're doing them virtually this year, instead of them choosing local judges, they were able to ship samples to judges around the world. So I have to say my job came with benefits. But in the process, I did get become a chocolate expert, and one of my big interests is supply chain visibility. You know, similar to what you were saying, Greg, about the mangoes, going all the way back to the cacao farmers, and we'll come back to that. But you know, I was ready for something new. I like big strategic projects. I wanted something that was going to, you know, engage my brain in new ways. I wanted to work with people I liked. And blockchain was actually something that interested me. And so I started networking in the blockchain community in Seattle because when I looked at blockchain, it reminded me a lot actually of EDI, again, more the analog version of blockchain, but how it set up trading partners in different ways to provide better visibility. And in the process of networking, somebody, a mutual acquaintance said to me, do you know Eric Weaver, when she heard what I was interested in doing? And I said, no. So I looked him up on LinkedIn, and I emailed my friend and I said, okay, I'd love an introduction, but I'm not ready yet. Let me do a few more things. And the next thing I know, I get a message in LinkedIn from Eric. He saw me looking at his profile, and you know, he was really interested in my food and software background and chocolate background in particular. And so we started talking, and really liked Eric, really liked getting to know the team, and it kind of fit all my criteria for what I wanted to do, and just very excited about what Transparent Path is trying to accomplish. And so that's my background and how I kind of ended up here. So Greg, I think I kind of got to how I met Eric. Greg, how did you meet Eric and connect with Transparent Path?
It was similar. I think he must be on the different business social media networks all the time, constantly networking. But yeah, it was similar. I was looking for, so I had just moved from Berlin back to the US. I moved to Brooklyn, New York, and I was looking for projects to really test the Buildly core and really sort of look at ways to build out more open source developers and projects and build out the community around Buildly. And I found Eric, I think it was on angel.co. He probably will remember better than I will, but and we started talking about the different ways we could bring these ideas together. He liked blockchain. I still am not a huge fan of blockchain for most scenarios. I like it in certain, I like the idea of it more than I think I like the execution of it sometimes. But overall, I liked, he was interested in microservices. He was interested in open source. And I think that's where that conversation started. We were trying to find ways to make things work, and Buildly started to adjust our business model more towards this collaborative collective of open source developers. And so the opportunity came about right at about the same time Sunil was looking to come on board as CTO. And so I thought, well, Sunil and I talked, and we thought, this is, you know, really connected. I liked the sort of energy and the team overall, right? And this vibe of very experienced managers, experienced developers, and people that were part of the product development side, people that were part of this, you know, the larger supply chain side, and things that I didn't know and I could learn about and also get involved in. So that's what really got me there. Eric sort of put all these different pieces together and brought Sunil and I back on at the same time, and we just jumped from there. And I think if it was around, I don't know, if May or somewhere in there, like right in the middle of this whole COVID craziness, and we were trying to put together the second pilot, and that's when I think we were starting to talk about product managers and how to manage the overall process. And I think that's kind of around the time you started.
Yeah, it is. I came on in May, and I just wanted to clarify something. I know I was talking about blockchain, and I think I just want to clarify, I feel similarly to you. I think it is one of many tools. It is often a hammer looking for a nail. It's a great tool in the right scenarios, but I think when businesses talk about blockchain, a lot of the time they're thinking visibility or traceability, because, you know, if you've already got a trusted network of trading partners, it may not be the right solution, right? It just depends. So I think, you know, all of us, not to speak for everybody, but I think we're all kind of on the page that, you know, it is a useful tool. but it may not be the holy grail of supply chain traceability.
Yeah.
I think there, the internet sensors and finding the right solution for the right client is the way to go. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm interested in blockchain. It's what brought me here, but I'm interested for it in the right reasons.
Well, I don't mean to bash on it either. I like it in certain scenarios, and I think there's some use cases there. But so that's kind of what made you find the company. But really, what was the sort of just like the final thing that made you say, yes, I want to join this and be part of this?
It was a little bit of a leap of faith, but I had met Eric in person before COVID, and unfortunately I got to know all of you after COVID, so I've only met all of you virtually, and nowadays that's kind of the way it goes. But I was really impressed with Eric's passion, energy. I was really excited about not only the technology that exists now, but the technology Eric is aware of that is out there that could be commercially available that would allow us to do so much more. But for me personally, it was really about solving these big strategic challenges in supply chain, in food, improving food safety, reducing food waste, all those things. But also working with a really great group of people that I liked and that we could collaborate with. And I think, I've worked in many corporate settings. It's not always the most collaborative environment, but I really enjoy our team. I think we work really well together. We all bring something to the table. We're very collaborative. And I think it makes our product and our company stronger for it. So, it was a combination of, I was really interested. It was exactly the product I was looking for to try to help solve problems. And then I really liked the people, which was kind of the cherry on top.
Nice. Yeah.
So,
good. Yeah. That same for me. I think the only other thing I would add is that it was nice after working in so many startups over the last few years to work with a group of just really experienced professionals, because I was the first time in a long time where I wasn't the oldest person in the room when having a conversation, and that felt really good too. And I think the team overall is a great mix and such similar backgrounds in a way, but also so diverse in the different approaches. And I remember hearing Paulette talk about her experience as on the road as a roadie. And I thought, okay, these are the people that I want to work with. So that was
things
perfect.
in common. And I know we're going to hear from Sunil and Paulette next week at the same time. So if you want to hear from the rest of our team, tune in again next week. But so Greg, what excites you most about the future of traceability?
It's a really hard, I think it goes back to the whole thing around Haiti and that experience with the farmers there and watching them up in the mountains and having to find ways to keep track of everything that they were farming and then pushing it back down. I think that's the idea of following that, seeing that. I remember liking the problem to something similar to that we had seen before when we were working in the Syrian crisis as well. So around distributing wash kits and health kits out to the Syrian refugees when I was in Jordan, looking at the systems they were using for that. And I remember thinking, there's so many places where this is applicable. Why isn't there something already done to manage this? And the IoT, they've seen some IoT devices come up and look at things, especially around water and management. But I think what really excites me is still the idea of the consumer at the end, right? And we've talked about this a couple times, where it's the consumer that can go and scan a QR code or a barcode at a store off a shelf, and then see this, not just the history of how long it's been on the shelf and where it came from, but the story of that farmer, maybe that mango farmer or that cacao farmer, and how they took that and what they did to grow that, and how the whole process, I think, is really interesting. And I think that's what motivates me is to be able to say, okay, someday, soon, I hope, we're going to be able to scan that barcode, and I'm going to be able to tell my kids that I know this is safe, this is good food, and here's the story of where it came from, even if it's just off the shelf at Safeway or something, right? And that's really cool. I don't know if that's the same for you, but
yeah, I mean, it's pretty much exactly the same. For me, the holy grail is being able to trace the chocolate all the way back to the cacao farmer. I think one of the challenges is, in all of these scenarios that we're talking about, you've got it's not just the technology, it's the process and the people who are in it, and some of the realities of the countries you're working in. So, it's not like technology is going to be the immediate solver, but it's certainly an important tool in getting there. But I think, when you're talking about, for me, it is also being able to be a consumer and have the consumers fully engaged. Having sold chocolate for over a decade to consumers, they're very interested. And, chocolate is the medium I'm used to, but they're very interested in where their chocolate came from and how it was grown. And, there are some companies doing sort of what I would call marketing QR codes, where they'll put a QR code on a product and, a consumer can scan it. And it tells a beautiful story about the farmer, but it's not directly traceable back to that farmer, and it's all marketing. And so I think, it is going to be wonderful when we get to the point where we have the item level sensors that are printable that we can put on these items, and the consumer can, scan that QR code. That's one, wonderful use for it, but there's plenty of other uses for it. But that and see a chain all the way back to where it came from, that traces the supply chain and is not just a marketing story. And so for me, being able to bring the consumers in is really important as well, as helping our business customers.
I wanted to add something there, that we did a 2020 Transparent Path study that is available to all the participants of the webinar. And we actually found that people were willing to pay more for visibility and transparency in their food. So this is something that's borne out, not just in chocolate, which is a great use case, but also for many kinds of food, especially the higher dollar food items. If people are going to pay a lot more money for organic, pasture fed, well-raised food, they're even willing to pay more if we actually show them where it was and what happened to it along the way.
Nice.
I wanted to say we have about 6 more minutes. So I wanted to ask if the audience has any questions. We'd be happy to take them now. There is one question already. Besides investing in Transparent Path, how else can people help Transparent Path get off the ground?
Yeah, so we are looking for more pilot customers. We are, as Greg said, in pilot 2. And so we want customers who use, I guess I would say, refrigerated shipping, have some LTL and FTL loads going across the country and locally as well. So we want to try this out in a number of different scenarios. I think our sweet spot is also companies with a strong passion for social change and who are collaborative and interested in technology. So we're certainly looking for food producers, manufacturers, others in this food supply chain who would benefit from having IoT sensors that track temperature and humidity in real time, and help us continue to move our product forward.
I see a question about, do you have any customers yet, and where would those customers be? Are they domestic or are they international?
We are talking to one customer right now who's domestic, in the protein space. And we have talked to a number of potential customers internationally as well. I think, we would like to, we're open to starting in different areas. I think for our first pilot, it would be preferable to have them domestically, just so we can get off the ground. And, when you start introducing international customers, you have a whole nother level of infrastructure things to think about. But we are very open to both international and domestic customers.
Okay, thank you. There's another question. It sounds like there's some NGO experience, and why did you not do this as a nonprofit?
Well, so my experience in NGOs was especially now during the, let's say, the current administration, is that the funding isn't always there for the programs you want them to be. And I think nonprofit has an interesting twist on this, in that there are some things you can do to sort of help this move along, but really that there's so much on the technical side and so much that needs just investment in R&D, and it's hard to get nonprofit investment into research and development. And that's where the work that we're doing with Intel and the work we're doing with, and that Eric did previously with Xerox, and that we're continuing to do. And again, some of these IoT devices and some of the data science and AI that we're working on is very unique, and it's an exciting challenge, but at the same time, it's hard to pay for that with nonprofit donations. And so that's why I think, I do think there's really great, interesting ideas that can be built out of this and continue to grow into different areas. And so I think as a for-profit company, there's a lot of opportunity to grow and make this really successful. But what I like about this approach is that we are focused on the social benefit of it as well. And I think that it's really kind of the best of both worlds. We're able to get that done and still have the, let's say, the heart of an NGO, but maybe the mind at some places of a scientist and a business officer at the same time.
I have a related question, which is kind of tags on what you're saying. Can you give me an example of how this technology can potentially benefit members of our community who are food insecure?
Food insecure. So from my side, I can only think of a couple of scenarios, but I'm not sure if these are exactly what they're thinking about. But I know that in Syria, for example, when they were delivering health kits and food kits and safety kits there, a lot of the time they would be delivered to a head of household, or they would be delivered to a person that maybe wasn't trustworthy and would then resell things because they needed cigarettes, or they would resell things because they needed, so that it wouldn't actually get to the people that need it the most. And I think around food, that can be a problem as well, right? Making sure that you're tracking who's getting the food, the supplies are going to the right distribution center, that it's not being resold or repackaged. I think there's interesting ways to keep that in mind, but it's also just about, for those places that are paying too much, or getting spoiled food, or getting food that isn't quite right, in the end, it's a way to be able to see that and track that. And Lauren, maybe you have some better ideas around that. But those are the things
I mean, it's very well said. I think ultimately, we're wasting in the U.S. 30 to 40% of the food supply, just through bad, things like wasted food. So I think the solution helps certainly preserve and our food supply, and allow us to direct more of that to food insecure populations. But I think, Greg, what you said is makes a lot of sense.
There's also the lessons we learned in COVID-19, where predictive intelligence is going to help us get the food to the right place. And that's through IoT, like we're using. That's, putting sensors on packages and then being able to shift food in transit as opposed to it going to its endpoint. And that's where some of the food waste comes from. Not only breakdowns in the cold chain, which is a huge problem, but also food that's going to the wrong place, sits on the dock, doesn't get picked up in time. And that's, so between all those inefficiencies, the sensors and shared data is actually going to help us solve that problem of getting the right food to the right place before it gets wasted. Food is the third largest cause of climate change. So it's definitely a global issue, but also can be a locally solved issue. We're at time. So I want to thank both of you for joining us today. It was really cool hearing a little bit more about your background. Every time I hear you kind of talk about your experience, I learn something new. So that's really exciting. If you like what you heard and are interested in investing in Transparent Path, or you know others in your network who may be interested in what we're doing, please visit netcapital.com/companies/transparent-path to read more about our investor offering. And you can also see the webinar we recorded last week, which is more about the structure of the company and the business side. If you want to know more about that, please visit our page on NetCapital. And you can see that. Join us next week for our next conversation, where we're going to look a little bit more about the experience and strategy of Transparent Path. If you'd like to get us in touch with us directly, again, go through the NetCapital website. And we hope you'll reach out to us if you have any questions or would like to discuss our vision further. We'd be very, very happy to talk to you. Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks.